Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters Office Hours with me, Dr Audrey Tang. My co-host is Judith Crosier, and this is the show where we look at all things workplace well-being. Today we are joined by Laura Howard. She is the founder of The Contented Workplace with her tagline of be your best and bring your best self to work, which is so important. But how do we do that? Well, we're going to find out. Let's head over to the main studio. Welcome to Mental Health Matters Office Hours, Laura. It's so great to have you here.
Hi Audrey, hi Jude, it's great to be here.
Well, your work is really important, and we're going to be discussing some topics that we don't often discuss on this show. We talk a lot about women in the workplace, but we don't talk about parents in general, and I think that's something that's very important. But first, please tell me about the work that you do and a bit more about your professional journey.
Perfect. Well, I experienced a career reboot a couple of years ago, having been in senior leadership for over 10 years. But what I cared most about was how employees performed at work and how they experienced work, just to enjoy work more and bring their strengths to their businesses. So therefore, I became really passionate about behaviour in the workplace and used that passion to retrain in organisational psychology and executive coaching to use those innate insights that we each have at work and lever those so we could all enjoy work more. And that's how I spend my time now, helping individuals and organisations to experience work better.
Love that.
Oh, fantastic. So for you and your clients, what is a contented workplace?
Yeah, brilliant question. My byline is to be your best and bring your best to work. And if I can break that down a bit for the viewers, it is about feeling authentic at work. Can we exist at work how we would ordinarily in our day-to-day lives, and to feel that sense of connection with our work without feeling that we need to be someone different. And we know that scientifically that has a link with our own mental well-being, if we can feel like we're not hiding or concealing anything. So that's the first one, to be authentic. Number two is a sense of fulfillment, and we get that through bringing our own unique strengths to our work, being able to craft and devise our professional lives that suit and maximise our own unique strengths. And the third one is about belonging, feeling a sense that we're connected to a community, something greater than ourselves at work, that we can contribute to and be a part of a bigger picture. So they're the three key things that contentment work is for me and my customers.
Definitely important, and actually things that I think a lot of us start knowing about and focusing on, but we lose that as we go along. And this probably brings me nicely to the next question, which is your focus, which is on C-suite females. Now, C-suite is, for our viewers, just in case, the chief executive type suites, the chief financial, anything with the leadership in front of that. And are there common issues that they tend to present with? So just as you were talking about that sense of authenticity and who they are. And I think it can be easy to start masking when you get to a certain level. So are there certain things that C-suite professionals present with that perhaps are unique to them?
Yes, yeah, brilliant question again. We know that we exist in a world where stereotypes are rife. Our brains, of course, are making shortcuts regularly to conserve energy, and that's often how we think. So we have to unravel that in the workplace, where more frontal cortex thinking is necessary, of course, to make these important decisions. So stereotypes is a massive barrier for female women leaders. And let me explain a little bit more about that. Women leaders are often considered communal and nurturing. And conversely, leadership, how we traditionally construct it in our brains, is more so around being what we call agentic, so that force, that focus of single-mindedness and goal-directed behaviour. That's how we imagine leadership. So when you combine the two, they're very much counterintuitive to one's historic and traditional view of leadership. And that's where you get the tension with authenticity, because to fit in a stereotype, a woman often imagines that they have to mould into this more agentic and forceful character. We're seeing that change, of course, with more modern leadership stereotypes. If you think about Jacinda Ardern's work as New Zealand Prime Minister, for example. I was at a seminar yesterday and my audience said that Michelle Obama was their vision of authentic leadership. So we are seeing a lot of change. But because we exist in this world where stereotypes perpetuate and remain unchallenged, it means that women often suffer with lower self-esteem. And that can really be crippling in the workplace when, as I alluded to, that goal-directed behaviour and focused behaviour can be seen as rewarded and recognised in terms of these senior leader roles. So it can be very much a barrier if you're someone that has experienced this context and it's had a negative impact on your self-esteem.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the workplace still feels quite male, you know, generally. And so how can we make the world of work more accommodating to women without women having to be more male in their approach and in their ways?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we see a lot of attention on this. You know, the FTSE 250 companies have quotas now for women in board positions. And we are seeing greater women in board positions. But what we're not seeing, at last count it was below 15%, is women in those top CEO and chair positions. So this is where the real work needs to happen. And how we do that is to develop representation in workplaces. I was at a conference recently and a lady was presenting her thesis. Her thesis had investigated a doctoral thesis was about what we needed to see in the workplace to improve representation. And it was to be that lucky boss, be that boss that you wanted to see, that you needed in your early career. What support did you need? Who cheerleading you did you recognise? Who did you need to put forward for all those opportunities? So I really resonated with that recommendation because I loved that sentiment, lucky boss, because often we hear about the Queen Bee syndrome. Mm-hmm. If a woman has experienced work difficult themselves and has through efforts arrived at the top, they can feel that they don't need to smooth the way for other women. Mm-hmm. And that can manifest in resentment or negative behaviours towards younger women climbing up the ranks. So be that lucky boss is a key takeaway there.
That's really important because you're so right, Laura. I've heard so many stories where women have raised issues to HR departments, to other women about harassment and so on. And because exactly as you said, Laura, that woman in that high position in HR has struggled to get to that position. They've kind of gone, oh, well, what are you worried about? Yes. I dealt with it, grow up. And that really isn't helpful. Now, we're going to keep you with us because not only are you so informative, but I love the energy. It's so warm
Yeah.
and accepting, and that's just so important. We'll be back just after this.
Navigating today's workplace is tough.
Toxic employees, endless drama, a lack of motivation. We've all been there.
But fear not, we are here to help. My name is Leanne and I'm a chartered psychologist.
My name is Al and I'm a business owner, and together we dig into the scientific and commercial secrets behind great workplace cultures in Truth, Lies and Work.
A no-nonsense, award-winning psychology podcast brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network. We explore practical strategies for building a great workplace.
We debunk buzzwords and bring you the very best advice around finding and keeping great people. From personality tests.
Personality tests they're mostly bollocks. I don't know what kind of language you do on your podcast. I don't know if people know this, but the man who wrote the Wonder Woman comics is the person who invented the disc.
When more flexible working became a norm, you no longer hurt your career prospects by being the one person who worked flexibly.
All the way to avoiding high turnover.
We recruit and promote people to managerial roles based on their technical skills, not their people skills. This is a very fundamental problem we have, which we haven't directly tackled.
From toxic-free cultures,
interventions for the individual are only half the answer. Systemic change is the other half.
to sustainable growth.
Thinking beyond just paying somebody a good salary, I think is super necessary now. We have to offer so much more than that.
We have got you covered.
So join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays where we help you to simplify the science of work and build amazing workplace cultures.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours. We've got Laura Howard with us, and she is the founder of the Contented Workplace. Now, Laura, there is a rise in female-led companies. We are seeing a lot more of them. So with that, do you think we're going to see some societal shifts? And if so, what could that look like?
Yes, I'm thrilled to see a rise of female-led companies, because thinking back to what we talked about before the break in terms of stereotypes, when you two, Audrey and Jude, were youngsters, you know, how many female-led companies did you see growing up?
Yeah, exactly.
But we're seeing the rise of you know, more companies. If you think about the pandemic, lots of companies started from our dining tables and our bedrooms, for example. So this is fascinating. But yet the high growth companies led by females are still underfunded in terms of investment, equity investments. So that's definitely an area that we need to see more work on, certainly here in the UK. But female leadership across research and scientific findings has been linked to greater employee well-being. It's also been linked to greater performance. There was an experiment a few years ago on the TV that you might have remembered, and there was a range of amateur stockbrokers that were placed with an investment bank in the city. And looking at the performance of the individuals, it was interesting to see the risk appetite across different demographic groups. And there was certainly a standout candidate for me, and that was one of the females who was very systematic, wasn't taking a huge amount of risk, but was very consistent and demonstrable in her work in that experiment. And that always stands out for me as a great asset. You might know the book Invisible Women.
Yes.
By Caroline Criado Perez. And in Caroline's book, she of course talks about a data-led world and inventions that have missed 50% of the population in their design. Seatbelts being the obvious example. I think the other one was air conditioning units has been designed around optimal body temperatures for the males. So I would love to see more female-driven innovations that speak to our unique consumer needs, which is going to ultimately grow wealth and opportunities for everyone, meaning social mobility, is going to rise exponentially.
You talk about something really key here, because what we do see at the moment, and okay, this may be a stereotype, is something aimed at women is the same thing as the thing aimed at men, but just pink. And that's a bit problematic, isn't it? Because it isn't speaking to that depth of innovation, of recognising and appreciating the differences, the fundamental root differences.
It's so true. A pink seatbelt is going to be no more comfortable for a woman than a black or brown one, is it?
And no more safe, is
no.
it? You know? That's it. Or nor would a fluffy one, you know?
No.
So, in the training that you deliver through the Contented Workplace, what are some of the key mindset shifts you've had to help those leaders make? Male and female, actually. Because I think sometimes men also need to make that shift to understand why it's so important to, as I say, just not make something pink.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So when leaders come to me, they're often a bit of a crossroads or feeling a bit stuck. So it's really important to explore that. And that might be that they found themselves working in a business or a team that is counterintuitive to their most deeply held values. So, for example, I used to work with a chap who worked in defence. So his organisation was manufacturing bombs, and that no longer aligned with his core values. So it's really important to explore those, because as I explained earlier, when we align our unique strengths and values to our work, we can really do our best and give our most effortless work that receive the greatest results. So with that new knowledge comes a greater confidence that we know we can work in an area where our work has value and worth, and we can make a huge difference. And this is greatly empowering. This new knowledge, leaders that I work with can do something with that, not only for themselves, but for their teams, for their families. You know, they can be role models. I remember growing up in the north of England, and work was messy, work was stressful, work was dirty. But think about how we are leading the next generation of our workforce to be aspiring and excited about work. You know, I want my children to be all those things about work in a way that I wasn't, given the story I've just shared.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. So with the coaching exercises you use, are you able to take us through one now?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Would that be all right? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, will you be my guinea pig then?
Yes.
Yes, let's do it.
We will.
Brilliant.
And
Okay.
do our viewers need pen and paper or anything? Or are we good to...
Yeah, let's proceed. Yes. So, imagine, Jude, if you could, that you've been in your career several years, and your line manager has asked you to do a new project. So what might that be? Might that be to do a bit of public speaking or to mentor someone? Just think of something that resonates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to tell you what it is? Oh,
Yes,
okay.
please. Yeah.
Well, something that I was asked to do recently was to project manage. It's not very exciting. So the installation of electricity outdoors, so that the community can use the electricity for events and things. So it's quite a big project.
Okay, so something that perhaps is a scale that wouldn't be run of the mill. Is that fair to say?
Yes, definitely.
Okay,
yes.
so you've been asked to elevate what you're doing. Okay, and that might bring up a little bit of resistance if I'm thinking accurately.
I suppose maybe not resistance as much as maybe a bit of anxiety, because I didn't know the first thing about electricity. So yes, it's where to start, how to approach it, etc.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. So already you're sharing with us that your brain has leapt to a scenario that's less than pleasant.
Definitely.
So you're starting to imagine some of the potential pitfalls in accepting this new project.
Yes. Yeah, and yes, there were some pitfalls along the way for various different reasons. But yeah, I think the pitfalls I anticipated maybe didn't happen, and then other ones that weren't anticipated did happen, which is probably normal.
Yeah. Yet you have a resilience here, and you've clearly demonstrated that in overcoming multiple unforeseen events.
Yes.
So what I invite my clients to do, because it's very simple and quick for our Neanderthal brain, of course, to think about the worst things, but I invite them to think about what's the best that could happen.
Okay.
So if you think back to that conversation with your manager that was inviting you to step out of your comfort zone, that had seen something unique in you, which meant, of course, you could absolutely smash this project that was of a scale slightly elevated to what you were, of course, used to, that saw your skills, saw your contribution, knew that it would have an optimal outcome. And what instead is the best that could happen? If you think back to when the two of you were discussing it, Jude.
Well, what I was visualising was how events could then take place rather than events were taking place already, but the electricity to make everything work were literally people who lived around the village green were saying, oh, you can plug in. So cables were coming out of various houses. So, and that's literally what happened. So I was visualising what it should be and what it could be like, which was as it should be, a central place and everything being plugged in safely and running safely and running well. So that visualisation was what kind of kept me going, and then eventually that's what happened. But yeah, with hiccups along the way.
Yeah. So I'm inviting your viewers, when we're met with a new challenge, we often think about all the bad things that could happen. But instead, let's think about how we can add value to our organisation if we're given, a step up on a project. How could we help the end users, in your case, the villagers, access this new thing? All these great opportunities that could happen as a consequence. And yeah, sure, things will emerge and change, but we've got the resilience and the capability to work with that rather than beginning to think about things as a bit of a catastrophe.
That's a really nice exercise, because even if you're in a situation whereby, and sorry, I realise we have to go into a break in a second, but even if you're in a situation where you are, maybe you think you're being stitched up by being given that particular project. So maybe that relationship with that company has broken down to the point where you're expecting, I've been given this because you want me to fail. Focusing on the end result of, but I'm going to give the community this. That's the real resilience and positivity that comes from you that needs to be celebrated. And I think we need to focus on that bit of the mindset rather than you're stitching me up, this always happens, which can clog up so much energy.
It could have done, but I was absolutely just because I've just literally left, as you know, this week, that company. And I was determined that was going to all be in place before I left.
And it was.
And that came from just dogged determination, really.
And then I guess, Laura, you'd be saying to focus on that bit when you're thinking about yourself, not thinking, gosh, I had people were so awful.
Yeah.
But actually I had the strength and grace and dignity to get that project done.
Deliver it, yeah.
Laura, we're keeping you, and we'll be back just after this.
Hey there, I'm Diane Forster, host of I Have Today, where we talk about the art of intentional living. Our show is on the Fresh Takes channel on Mondays at 11 a.m. Pacific. So if you're ready to be inspired, empowered, and educated and learn how to live the I Have Today way, then tune in. Hope to see you there.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours, where we're talking to Laura about the contented workplace. Really interesting discussion. So what changes do you think need to be made when it comes to supporting parental mental health?
Yes, this is a rising agenda issue for many employers that I speak to at the moment. And not just when we tend to think about parents, it's easy to leap to the female carer. But actually, the elephant in the room hugely is male and female carers as well. And we see additional layered mental health implications for parents that overlap into the workplace. And that might be financial pressures of having young children, additional childcare costs, availability of childcare, work not concluding when parents arrive at home. Then there's another layer of work to commence with the childcare, the homework, the extracurricular activities. And this is even more challenging if indeed you have a child at home with additional needs.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a massive role, not only for the employer, you talked about HR, Audrey, and as, of course, the line manager. And it's very easy for these issues to be disregarded just because they're not in the consciousness of workplace decision makers. If there's a manager with people responsibility that perhaps isn't a parent themselves or was a parent several decades ago, it's just not in the consciousness. It's not because anyone wants to do any ill to any employees. It just hasn't been raised. So it's a big focus of mine at the moment to bring attention to this issue in workplaces.
That is absolutely key. And you mentioned about a child who is ill or a child who's got additional needs. And we don't often think about that. We may think, okay, parents, young children. But what are some of those unspoken pressures on parents who do have all of those extra demands that we need to know about?
Yeah. So for example, at a very simple level, a child that's having difficulty staying in school.
Yes.
Because of additional needs, anxiety or mental health needs. So this is going to vastly be not only an emotional labour for someone working in an organisation. It's additional unpaid work is how it's often referenced. So to have a supportive and safe workplace where you can bring these things up, psychologically safe, is a huge importance. And we know that if we have a strong psychological contract with our employees, of course, they're more likely to be loyal and give those organisational behaviours and give extra. So this is very much a two-way street we talk about, don't we, of course, in organisations, to represent and recognise that employees are a huge asset. So to work in partnership with them rather than against them when life throws us these curveballs, as it always does.
Yes, it's that psychologically safe space to even bring up the issue, knowing that it will be heard is so important. And sort of relating to that, I think there is also a need for cultural sensitivity here, because you've also got this sandwich generation now where you got younger children at home, but you're also caring for elderly parents. And then when I say cultural sensitivity, there are some cultures where this is so demanded, not even hoped for or required, but demanded of that young person, or not a young person, young adult in that situation. And so what can employers do to help people when if they realise or are told, I'm supporting this parent and I'm also having to pick up my children from school and they might have an additional need?
So we've talked about a psychologically safe workplace where conversations at a very fundamental level can occur between employees and managers. Organisations might want to put additional mechanisms in place, such as flexible working, family-friendly working patterns. And as well, I've worked with a number of organisations that have developed employee resource groups. These are communities of practice, if you like, where individuals come together as a community and share their common challenges, which might be caring for others, for example, or parental mental health. And together, their voice is amplified in the organisation, and they can make very practical recommendations and help put those in place with the systems across HR in the business to make work really work optimally for each and every one of these individuals, no matter how challenging or unique their home life is. Because what we don't want to do is eliminate anyone from the workplace. You know, we've heard a lot about the government agenda, about creativity, innovation, each and every one of us bringing a talent to a workplace. So that would really be a backward step for the UK if indeed anyone was excluded from the workplace because of their caring responsibility.
Yes, hugely.
That's true. So why is it important then for workplaces to take into account employees' personal situations as well as the professional side?
Yeah, because we've talked at length about authenticity and the scientific research that supports if we can be our unique selves at work, we are going to feel healthier. And we know the benefits of having healthier people at work. We are also going to feel like we can perform better. We can contribute greater. We're going to be more loyal to our organisation and less likely to want to leave that business. We're going to commit our careers. We're going to be ambassadors for that brand and that organisation. So these are key things.
Yeah, and not all of them we would necessarily think about. It's really important to think about both. And where have you seen this work well? And what are your top tips for the workplace in having this holistic approach?
Yeah, I've seen it work well in several organisations, which means there's a great deal of best practice out there.
That's good.
I would encourage any organisation that recognises that there's a cohort of employees that might be facing parental mental health layered complications across their business. I would really encourage them to start to do some research, you know, to reach out to me and other behavioural psychologists out there that can really connect them with other best practice organisations. But the best advice is just to listen to your employees, create safety and listen to your employees, because they know what they need to get the best work out of them. But I suspect they've never been asked the direct question often.
Oh, it's so simple and so true. Yeah. So simple, so true. Laura, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Where can we learn more about you, follow you on LinkedIn or on socials?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is my main platform. I'd love to hear from all of your viewers over there. Laura Howard on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been such a fascinating discussion. We'll be back just after Business Boost. In Business Boost this week, I wanted to share something I learned at a conference recently. This was a discussion on how do we embed well-being into the workplace. So you've heard our guests, you've heard her talk about creating a psychologically safe space, getting employers to listen to their teams, and so on. But how do you do that in a big organisation? Because in a smaller organisation, it's a lot easier. You can generally feel comfortable going up to talk to somebody because it's usually just you and them. But in a big organisation, one of the best suggestions I've heard comes from EasyJet. And EasyJet has multiple locations. They are dealing with multiple cultures as well. And what they do is they bring it back to policies and procedures. They have a standard policy. This is how we treat people in the workplace. It can be tweaked, but fundamentally, this is what we're expecting. And so, if a new employee asks about what your well-being efforts are, you can point to the policy. You can also say, okay, we get sometimes it's not delivered as well as we would hope for it to be, but those managers will then be getting training. It all comes down to what you have in writing. So whilst it may sound a bit dull, sometimes having that policy in place, that procedure, and that is agreed by a group of people who it generally affects, so get the information from people, ask your employees what they're looking for, having that standard policy, and then being able to change it or tweak it for cultures can be a really good starting point. We've reached the end of the show where we reflect on the incredible things our guests say. And we always learn loads.
Always. Yeah, we have such great guests. And Laura was really great. The thing that stood out for me was when she said that employers or managers should be able to, or employees should be able to feel safe enough to talk about their personal situations. Psychologically safe, I think she said. I think that's amazing, and I think that probably doesn't happen a lot in many workplaces. So, and it made me think of another lovely guest we've had, Fern, because she does that brilliantly in her companies, in her organisation. And it's just brilliant to know that an employee can feel safe enough to talk about something which may or may not affect their work, but actually if they want their employer or their manager to know about something, that they feel safe enough to say that and they're not going to be judged.
Yes, and do watch Fern's show. That's about the healthy workplace, what makes a happy, healthy workplace. The other thing she said was how women are still feeling they have to almost be like men in order to succeed. And we know that can go against our own authenticity and our need to nurture and so on. And she gave the example of Michelle Obama, and I think she is a great example. But my favourite example of a female leader is actually Dolly Parton.
Oh.
Because she is unashamedly feminine.
How interesting. So she's being authentic, being herself.
Yes.
But still has the qualities to lead.
Yeah, she's got so many businesses. She's such a philanthropist, does so much for charity. And she has absolutely no qualms in wearing rhinestones head to toe, emphasising her assets, and just being a woman.
Wow.
And I love that. So I think whilst I have so much respect for Michelle Obama, of course, yeah, it's Dolly that sort of speaks to my authenticity.
There's more than one way of leading if you're a woman. That is really interesting.
Yeah. Such an interesting topic and so much to think about. And the other thing was how we don't always talk about parents.
Yes.
And men are sometimes going through a similar struggle, especially we forget that it's a parental team. Yeah,
exactly. We do. I think Laura was right. We automatically think of the female parent, you know, the mother, and it's, sometimes the father might have more responsibilities in different ways.
Or you've got a situation where mum has to pick up the children and do the school stuff, dad has to look after the parents and do the other caring responsibilities. And so I think that parental team is an important group to support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Lots to think about.
Loads to think about, as always. Well, if you've got some comments, please, we'd love to hear from you, and have a healthy week.